Hi, my name is Autif Kamal. This is another video on logic and reasoning. This one is on conditional propositions. Below you'll find my contact info. You can send any questions, comments, and feedback to kautif@gmail.com. You can do the same using my Skype user ID, autif.kamal. When you get the chance, please check out my website, webs.logicandreasoning.com. There you'll find my other videos on logic and reasoning, supplementary exercises, a forum to leave comments and questions for the viewers and me, a link to a chat room to discuss content either while or while not watching the videos. There's information on when I'm available to discuss content live, and information on how to earn certificates. Okay, now I'm going to move on to an advantage of knowing how to formulate conditional propositions. To show you the advantage, I want to refer back to a past experience that I had. So back in 2006, I was working out. I was doing bicep curls. The weight was too heavy and I was putting my back into it. So the next morning, my back was injured. If you or a friend were to ask me how I injured my back, one way I could tell you is I could say, well, I injured my back because I was using an improper form to lift heavy weights. Okay, now in that case I would tell you the effect first, I hurt my back, and then the cause, because I used an improper form to lift heavy weight. You can say it that way, but unfortunately that way of saying it doesn't really exactly correspond to the sequence of how cause and effect actually occurs. A conditional proposition actually represents the sequence in which cause and effect occurs. So here's how you'd say it in a conditional proposition. If, like for example, I wanted to give you a rule to follow. If you use an improper form to lift heavy weights, then you will injure something. Okay, so if you use an improper form to lift heavy weight, that's the cause. Then you'll injure something, that's the effect. So just like how in cause and effect you have the cause first and the effect first, in a conditional proposition it goes the same way. You have the cause first, then the effect. Because that's closer to because that directly corresponds to the actual sequence of cause and effect, I think conditional propositions are clear to follow, and that's an advantage of them. Now I'm going to show you some visuals, and I want to go into different cases in which the same conditional proposition could be true or false. But before I go into that, I just want to go over the parts of a conditional proposition. If the car crashes, that part is the antecedent or the cause, and then it will explode, that is the consequent or the effect. If the writing is in green, then that part will be true. If the writing is in red, that part will be false. Okay, now for the first conditional proposition, if the car crashes, it will explode. So it's saying that if the car crashes, then it's necessary that it will explode. It exploding is something that will happen right after the car crashing. It's saying both of those are true. In that case, the conditional proposition is true. Now let's say it's false that the car crashes, but the effect still occurs that it will explode. That could also be true, because it could be that it explodes in another way. It could be that it's set ablaze, or a bomb is put in it and the bomb was detonated. I'm just giving you examples of how, even though the car crashing didn't occur, there could be other causes to result in the same effect of it exploding. Now let's say it's false that the car crashes and it's also false that it will explode. That conditional proposition is true, because it could be that a parking lot or a car sits idly in a parking lot, undisturbed by people, undisturbed by nature. It just sits there, so nothing's going to happen to it. It's not going to explode. Now let's say it's true that the car crashes but false that it explodes. In that case, that proposition, that conditional proposition, will be false. It directly contradicts the first conditional proposition. The first one says that the car exploding is an effect that will occur right after the car crashes. The last conditional proposition is saying it will not explode if the car crashes. Okay. Now, since the first one says that it exploding is an effect that follows immediately after the car crashing, it cannot also be that it will not explode. So, by default, the last conditional proposition cannot be true because the first proposition is true. Okay. Now, I'm going to give you an example to do on your own. What you're going to do first is you're going to formulate a conditional proposition based on the antecedent and consequent that I'm giving you. Then, in 4 different ways, you're going to make the antecedents or consequent or both true or false. You have 4 possibilities, just like we did over here. Okay, so I'll give you a moment to work on that. If you need more time, you can pause the video. Otherwise, I'll move on to the answers, which I will do right now. Okay, so the conditional proposition is if you are new to a subject, start with the basics. So the antecedent, if you're new to a subject, the consequent, start with the basics. So if you are new to a subject is the cause of you starting with the basics. So that conditional proposition is true. Starting with the basics is an effect that will immediately follow if it's true that you are new to a subject. Now let's say it's false that you're new to a subject, but it's true that you start with the basics. That could be true because it could be that you've engaged with the subject before, but now it's unfamiliar to you. So now you have to review the basics. You have to start with the basics again. Okay. Now for the third conditional proposition, let's say it's false that you're new to a subject and false that you start with the basics. That could also be true because you could be an expert and you know the basics like the back of your hand. So then you don't have to start with the basics. Okay. The last conditional proposition, if you're new to a subject, then it's false that you start with the basics. That one is false because the first conditional proposition says that it's an effect that immediately follows that if you are new to a subject, you will start with the basics. So it cannot be that if you're new to a subject occurs, that you will not start with the basics, since the first conditional proposition says that you will start with the basics. Okay? Now, to get your own practice, what you can do is go to books.google.com. On the left-hand side, there is a search bar. In that search bar, type in a keyword to find a book. If you want some ideas on what kind of keywords you could type in, you can go to yahoo.com and just look for headings from the article to type in the search bar in books.google.com. After you've typed in a keyword, press enter to search. On the left-hand side, look for preview available or free Google ebooks. Then select a book. Within the book, you're going to press and hold Control on the keyboard. While you're doing that, press F. And you're going to do a search within the book. You're going to type in if. You're either going to copy a conditional proposition that you find in the book, or you're going to use some of the material that you find to make your own conditional propositions. Then once you make your own or copy one, you're going to go over those 4 possibilities, like what would happen if the antecedent and consequent are both true, or what if the antecedent is false but the consequent is true, or what if they're both false, or what if the antecedent is true and the consequent is false. And you're going to say whether in each case the conditional proposition that you formulated is true or false. Okay? And yeah, okay. Now next up we'll talk about categorical syllogisms. What we're going to do there is we're going to go back to categorical propositions, and I'm going to show you how several different ways, maybe not all of the ways in the next video, but at least one of them, to put multiple categorical propositions together to logically justify a conclusion. And I'll go into greater detail in that in the next video. Alright, thank you.